3 o'clock in the morning, I woke up to go to the restroom and I felt sick as a dog. The next thing I knew, I had 8 large paramedics standing over me in my bedroom at 3 in the morning and talking to me. And I'm saying, well, what are you guys doing here? And they said, brother, you collapsed. We're taking you to the hospital. So they loaded me on a gurney, and I'm a big guy. So they hoisted me with 8 of them down the stairs of my house, and I'm screaming in an ambulance going down to a local hospital. And in that process, Brad, as people fade, sometimes you're kind of fading in and out of consciousness. That's what's happening for me. And I distinctly remember one of the paramedics trying to keep me awake and talk to me. I literally felt like I had a choice. It was very interesting. I had a mini life review, not an extensive one. Things were going pretty fast, and I was fading fast. But I do remember having that choice, and partly because I had some children that had fallen into some challenges in their life. I just felt like that wasn't a great time for me to pass to the other side. So I was kind of fighting for my life after making that decision.
Well, hello, John Hewlett. Welcome to the show. I am truly honored by you joining me and looking forward to our conversation. How are you feeling today?
You know, Brad, I'm feeling great, and I really appreciate having a chance to be on your show. So thoroughly enjoyed. My wife and I talked about meeting you in Chicago, and we just are delighted to be a part of Brad's network. We're excited about the things that you're doing.
Excellent. Well, I was very excited to meet you guys, and we're going to go into that story today for sure. And you know, every week we bring you powerful stories about life after death, awakening, and what it means to be human. And if that resonates, you'll love what's coming. Today, I'm joined by John Hewlett, founder and formulator of Cardiomiracle. After a 2007 medical crisis and a recommendation for major heart surgery, John went searching for safer, natural ways to support heart health. That journey led him to nitric oxide. Well, that's the 1998 Nobel Prize recognized signaling molecule, and eventually to leaving a 35-year career in finance to build Cardiomiracle, the company. And that's a nitric oxide centered daily drink now used by thousands. So we'll explore John's spiritual experience around that turning point and the science behind nitric oxide and the story of building Cardiomiracle. John, it's a joy to have you here today. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Great to be with you.
Well, you know, the background here is a couple of weeks ago, we were in Chicago at the IANDS conference, and that's the International Association of Near-Death Studies. And, I was there talking to a lot of folks, signing them up for more interviews, and what an amazing event it was. Now, I didn't know I was going to go into the vendor area and meet you, and basically your family, because it's a family-run business, and that's where I found out about Cardiomiracle and what it is you're doing. Now, you've got this great backstory. And when you're there, by the way, you just handed me one of the Cardiomiracle packets that you can see right here. And that has this nitric oxide induced sort of powder full of all sorts of vitamins and minerals. And all I had to do while I was at the show was mix it up into a drink here and then drink it down. And I felt great that very day. And it made me even feel better because you told me the story about why you created the company and what happened even before that, which is another reason you were there with your sort of spiritual experience that happened in the early days. So why don't I give you the microphone and the stage, and you can go ahead and share that amazing story.
Well, thank you, Brad. Well, and actually, I had a very interesting life, and at 57 years old, it was kind of at the top of my game in a lot of things. It had a multi-million-dollar financial practice, had actually even built a golf company. But in that process, as I was getting older, I was kind of on a time clock because my father had died at 62, my uncle at 57, my grandfather at 66, my cousin at 49, all of heart disease. So I had a kind of a ticking time bomb of heart disease in my family. And all of a sudden, I was treating a skin cancer with some natural means, and that set off my white blood count, and that overtaxed my appendix. And so I all of a sudden had to go in for an emergency appendectomy. And that was just the beginning of my spiritual transformative event of my life. I went in for surgery, got through the surgery. They sent me home because I seemed to bounce right out of the anesthetic well enough, and gave me a bottle of Loratab for pain. Didn't tell me I should take it with food, which was interesting. But so I took some Loratab, went to bed, 3 o'clock in the morning, I woke up to go to the restroom and I felt sick as a dog. The next thing I knew, I had 8 large paramedics standing over me in my bedroom at 3 in the morning and talking to me. And I'm saying, well, what are you guys doing here? And they said, brother, you collapsed. We're taking you to the hospital. So they loaded me on a gurney, and I'm a big guy. So they hoisted me with 8 of them down the stairs of my house, and I'm screaming in an ambulance going down to a local hospital. And in that process, Brad, and you know from your experience with all these people who've had these amazing experiences, that as people fade, sometimes you're kind of fading in and out of consciousness. And that's what's happening for me. And I distinctly remember one of the paramedics trying to keep me awake and talk to me. And I literally felt like I had a choice. It was very interesting. I had a mini life review, not an extensive one. Things were going pretty fast and I was fading fast. And but I do remember having that choice. And partly because I had some children and things that had fallen into some challenges in their life, I just felt like that wasn't a great time for me to pass to the other side. So I was kind of fighting for my life after making that decision. Well, then I get to the hospital, and then the emergency room really acted like an emergency room because they had determined I'd lost 5 pints of blood, and I was running almost on fumes. And so they started the immediate transfusions, hauled me up to the intensive care. In the intensive care, as the morning came, I felt like I was suffocating and the bleeding was continuing. They were debating whether they were going to have to open me up. They had done the surgery arthroscopically, through my little bit of extra padding in my stomach. And so I felt like I was suffocating, and that was a terrible feeling. And so I was breathing like the Lamaze when you're delivering babies, coaching your wife. And I kept telling the nurse, I said, I can't breathe. And finally there was a nurse change, and she came in, and I'm like, I'm having a hard time breathing. And she looked at my chart and she goes, oh my, they didn't give you the muscle relaxant. And so she ran out of the room, came running back in, jabbed me with Demerol, and within about 5 minutes, I was able to breathe again. So I really thought I was going to suffocate right there in the ICU. So then they transferred me down to a normal room once that crisis was over. And the cardiologist from the top cardiologist came in. I think they had brought him in on call because my EKG had gone crazy. My blood pressure was all over the place, having lost so much blood. And I had the strangest experience because he wouldn't even look at me. And it was the most impersonal, weird situation that I'd ever encountered in my life. I later found out actually through our mutual friend, Vinny Tolman. Vinny told me just the other day, because this happened to me 18 years ago. He told me the other day, I said, Vinny, what was going on with this cardiologist? And he goes, you had caught him drinking and he wasn't expecting to be on call. And so he was, Vinny's great intuitive. And he said he was drinking and that's why he wouldn't look at you, because he didn't want you to know that he was drinking. I thought, wow, that's interesting. So that's just a little side note from Vinny Tolman's, inspired knowings that he has. And so from that, he said he wanted me to go down and have another scan with the red dye, the radioactive red dye. Well, I had heard enough stories from my years in the insurance business that I knew that the red dye helped detect blockages and to find out where things were happening. But I also knew that it was toxic, that it was really hard on your cells. But so they took me down to do that. And in the midst of that, I had a second spiritual epiphany, which was I saw myself as I asked the nurse, what are the side effects of this procedure that I'm going for? And she goes, well, sometimes kidney failure. Well, so I'm having, as they're wheeling me down to the bottom of the hospital, I'm having all these second thoughts about having this procedure. And I saw in my mind's eye one of my spiritual heroes rising up in the basement of a jail and calling out the guards for having been so profane and so difficult and so horrible in the way they were treating him and others in prisoners. And I finally felt like I should stand up for myself and take charge of my own situation. So as they're poking me in the arm to put in the IV to send me in to do the scan, I said, I'm not going to do this. Take me back to my room. Well, I don't know if you've ever told a nurse and an orderly that you're not going to do something you've been told by the cardiologist, the head cardiologist, to do, but that didn't go over very well. And so I insisted. I said, if you don't take me back, I'm going to crawl back to my room. I said, take me back. And I'm a big guy, so I was a little intimidating. But so they took me back, and the nurses were running around. They were upset. They were debating with my wife. And this was before I married the lovely gal that you met the other day. But we were having this chaos in my room, and they were setting up an IV. And I said, what's that? Because by then I was getting a little frustrated with the previous 24 hours that had not gone very well. And they said, well, the cardiologist says you need to take it. I said, what is it? And they said, it's Levinox. And I said, what's Levinox? And they said, it's a blood thinner. And I said, you're going to give me a blood thinner and I'm internally bleeding still? So, it's like strike three. And so I said, get everything out of this room. I am not going to do this. I'm not going to have this treatment. I ended up having my wife call an energy worker that we trusted. She came and did, some of her energy work, showed me where the nicked vein was that they had nicked on the way out, put on some essential oils, frankincense and myrrh, gave me some cayenne pepper capsules. We had a fervent prayer, and the bleeding stopped. And I went to bed. The next day, the surgeon who had clipped the vein came in to apologize for clipping the vein. And he said, well, you caused quite a fervor here. I said, well, yeah, do you know what your cardiologist tried to give me? And I told him the name of the prescription, and he looked as white as a ghost. And he said, that would have killed you. I said, I know. Get me out of this hospital. I'm leaving. So he checked me out of the hospital. He says, but you know that they really think you need to come back for quadruple bypass. And I said, I'm not coming back. And so I went home, black and blue, gout attack, blood, had essentially been throughout my system. And that's when I had a desire, a changing, transformative thing that said, I need to find a natural alternative to quadruple bypass because I'm not going to have one. And that led me on the miracle of nitric oxide. A lot of people know what nitrous oxide is, the laughing gas of the dentist. But nitric oxide is actually, Brad, the third essential gas that they finally discovered in the 90s, that it was actually beneficial to the body, as opposed to they had originally thought it was kind of like carbon monoxide type of, that it was negative to the body. And then it was awarded the Nobel Prize in 1998 for essentially saying that it reversed heart disease and cardiovascular problems. Well, here it was, 2007. My father had died, my uncle had died, my cousin had died, all prematurely of heart disease. And I find out there's a Nobel Prize winning award that a simple supplement type induced amino acids and vitamins could create nitric oxide that could reverse that condition. And I was furious. And so once I started taking a good quality nitric oxide, vitamin D supplement, all of my conditions improved. My blood pressure went to normal. And I haven't been, since that time, that's now been 18 years, I haven't been on a single daily medication in 18 years. And so, and even though I'm a big guy and have a family history, I'm now 73 years and aging, but I'm 73 and I haven't had another cardiovascular problem since, which has been pretty shocking. So that led to me going to work, leaving my multi-million-dollar career as a financial planner, estate planner, tax strategist, to becoming a distributor for a direct sales company, selling nitric oxide, my mission was to save 1 million lives and to be the Johnny Appleseed of, sharing the good word like the Apostle Paul of nitric oxide. And then 5 years into that experience and becoming one of the top distributors in the world, making 7 figures, I decided that they weren't as committed to the science as I was. They wouldn't improve the product the way I felt they needed to as things emerged. So I walked away from that again at 62 and decided I needed to start my own company, which is what I did.
Well, that is an amazing story. And before we go into the second half, Act 2 of creating the company, I just got a couple of questions for you about this. Now, it sounds to me like you had an appendix issue that caused you to go in. And that caused the surgery. And with the NIC, that caused other sorts of problems. And when you were in there, they realized that you also might have had some sort of cardiac sort of congestion that you had to deal with also.
Blocked arteries, yeah.
So now I'm hearing that the NIC that had caused, during the first surgery, caused the bleeding internally. They didn't have to go inside and fix the NIC, it sounds like. It sounds like the healers found it, associated it, and were able to sort of heal it through energy healing.
That's exactly what happened, because they were debating that, for a nicked vein that was leaking and leaking blood into my system, the idea of opening me up wide open, being the fact that I was a shade overweight, was not the best, because you get MRSA virus, you have infection, you have all kinds of problems. And so they were debating what to do while I was getting enough transfused blood in order to survive that situation. And that's why, and then I had the subsequent epiphany that I shouldn't do this or it's going to kill me. And then I come back and ask the rhetorical question. I mean, how many people sit and quiz their nurse over what they're giving them? I was doing that even though I hadn't really slept in the previous 24 hours. I'd had all this trauma, but I was at least spiritually blessed enough to ask the question for myself, and found out they were going to give me a blood thinner, which would have easily bled me out like, deer hunting or something. So it was just one spiritual miracle after another. And I actually believe that there were forces in the process that were trying to destroy me and keep me from doing what I'm doing now. Because I literally believe that my mission is to heal the hearts of mankind in these last days of all of the challenges that many of us believe are, before the apocalypse or the return of deity, whatever people believe. I believe my mission is to do that. And so this isn't a business for me, but it's a mission. And that's why we've improved our product 8 times in 12 years. And that's why we try to offer the finest ingredients, the finest formula, the best science, because we frankly have lost confidence in the medical establishment in most ways.
Yeah, I think that's the case. You have to be your own doctor in many ways. You have doctors as consultants, but it's your life. They have to deal with so many different people throughout the day. And yeah, like you said, one of them might be drinking because he was called in on an emergency. That's unfortunate. But, it's interesting. You had that nick that was causing the bleeding. And as long as it's going to sort of clog up and heal on its own, and especially with the healing, that you had the energy healing, then that could be addressed. And it sounds like it was. But certainly with a blood thinner, boom, that thing would not have healed over and it would have bled even more. So thankfully you took a left turn. I'm the same way. I always ask about what's going on and what's going in. And most of the time it's not justified. So no. Now, we certainly know doctors and hospitals and ERs have saved the lives of countless.
Trauma, emergency medicine is very important, very important.
And that's a wonderful distinction there. The notion of trauma and life-saving is one thing. And then the notion of maybe sort of chronic care is a whole nother world. Now, so you then found yourself in a place after you kind of recovered from this where they thought, well, okay, you got some congenital heart, some issues here. And it could be that we want to crack you open, or it could be we want to put you on a bunch of medication. But either option for you was like, that doesn't seem optimal. So I'm going to go and figure this out. How in the world did you find nitric oxide?
I had a lot of clients. I had a very prominent insurance practice, and many of them actually owned the nutritional companies. I live in Utah, and Utah is kind of the nutritional MLM direct sales capital of the world. Nutritional supplements like the 3rd largest industry in our state. And so there are a lot of people who are, selling lotions, potions, and pills. But one of my associates said, hey, there's this product here. It's supposed to be pretty good for heart stuff. You ought to try it. So I tried it. I saw remarkable results within a short period of time. So I flew to California in Palo Alto, actually met with a top endocrinologist who had helped a lot of diabetic patients, and then actually even had opportunities to visit with the Stanford cardiovascular experts on the Nobel Prize that I found out that was around. Stanford is one of the leaders in validating a lot of different patents and different things when the Nobel Prize was awarded. So I just talked to a lot of smart people, Brad, and picked their brain. And because I was a financial person who had been solving complex financial problems, I liked learning. And I connect the dots. That's kind of one of my strengths. And so I just talked to smart people, and then I'd connect this dot and then another. And then 4.5 years later, when I decided to walk away from the company, because they were much more into how much money they could make and the margins and everything else, I was into the solution. I was totally on board with trying to heal people. And money was going to, money always follows value. And I thought if I provided the most value, that I'd do just fine. And so, because that had always worked for me in my previous career. So I decided to walk away from a 7-figure residual income, which most people would never consider doing, because I just felt like there was a bigger picture. And even though I felt at that time would saved and influenced maybe 1 million lives, would probably influence 20, 30 products that had spawned to help spread the science, I had loftier goals. It's now 100 million people, and I want to do that in the next 3 years. And so I appreciate being on podcasts like yours and others that we're looking to share the word that there's hope for people. They don't have to go in and have quadruple bypass most of the time. They don't have to have stents all the time. They don't have to go on dialysis all the time. There are answers out there. And the irony is, in the last 17 years, while I've been involved in this 18 years, every year there's new discoveries of how important nitric oxide is. And so now, that's why you hear about beets and you hear about arugula and spinach. You hear about a Beamer machine. You hear about red light therapy. All of those are essentially capitalizing on nitric oxide, which is the third essential gas that helps regulate everything in the body. It's the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the first responders. Nitric oxide is like the linchpin of the bodily functions. And there's now over 200,000 research papers and clinical studies on its importance to the body. I just happen to have been kind of I wasn't at the beginning, but I've sort of been the one who took it from, 2.0 maybe to 15.0. So I'm pretty excited about what we're accomplishing. And we actually have scientific, validated, AI-driven algorithms and studies that actually validate that our 53, formerly now 58 ingredients are the finest in the world and work together to accomplish solving lots of things. In fact, in one of our papers, it said, should have a very valuable input on all chronic illness. So when you can impact for the good all chronic illness, you're doing something pretty important.
Well, when we talked when I first met you, I got some interesting info that I'd like you to share, which is the bioavailability of all those ingredients. Now, you can get all sorts of concoctions and mixtures, whether they're, liquid form or powder, and mix them. But if you take them in the wrong way or combine maybe with the wrong other items, whether it's foods or liquids or caffeines or proteins or whatever it might be, that the bioavailability won't be there. Essentially, that means your body won't absorb them and benefit from them. So you kind of crack the code on that also.
Brad, it's really fun to talk to you because you really, no wonder you were a successful guy in Silicon Valley. You're a smart guy. One of the things I didn't even understand, that the body protects itself as much as possible. And so when you're taking a synthetic vitamin or you're taking a synthetic or something that isn't of the most food or a high grade quality from plants, it's not going to be absorbed by the body. The body's going to reject it, essentially, and that's where you get to the expensive urine that most people end up getting from most of their supplements. I just talked to a lot of smart people, and I thought, you know what? If nitric oxide and therapeutic vitamin D3 work together to open up the cell wall and then invite in additional quality plant and food grade ingredients, then I essentially had the freeway to myself, and I was able to put 50 race cars into the freeway to get them to the mitochondria or the cell where they could do the most valuable input and bioavailability. Ironically, instead of trying to do, 20, dock workers in a study or something, I decided to take it to the scientists that would do that. And I didn't know much about AI, but I was probably one of the first to do algorithms with worldwide scientists that basically took my, at the time, 53 ingredients that became 750 mechanisms of action, and then compared it against 15, 16 million data points of research. We did that 4 years ago at a great expense, because the PhD who had worked at one of the major pharmaceutical companies, there were two of them, they said, you have too many ingredients. They're gonna fight with each other. And I go, I think they're going to be fine, because the results are unbelievable that we're seeing from these hundreds and thousands of people we're dealing with. He says, well, you don't know what you're doing. I said, well, test it. That's what I'm paying you for. He goes, okay. 30 days later, tail between his legs, he calls me back. He says, man, I don't know how you did this. He says, this is like a perfect symphony. He said, there's nothing contraindicated with each other the way you've done it. And I said, well, Judy Mikovits, who in my opinion is one of the smartest women in the world, she said, John, you're not smart enough to have done this. This is a download from God. And I said, well, okay, I'll accept that. I'm more than comfortable having my formulator be God. And all I did is connect the dots. And with my miraculous life being spared multiple times in that event on 2007 in the summer, I believe that's true. And I believe that I've been led. I've talked to some of the smartest people in the country, and one of them recommended selenium. Another one recommended black pepper extract. Another one at certain times recommended turmeric in a certain form. I mean, I just talk to smart people, think about it, and then I intuitively have tried to do that. And that's why I decided to spend the money on extensive scientific analysis and testing of that against all the existing science that's out there. And at this point, there's nothing like Cardio Miracle, because no one has ever validated it with this kind of scientific analysis.
Well, that's pretty cool, because nowadays, especially with AI, you can take all of the interaction information plus the absorption information and run full-on simulations.
Yeah.
And so you can pop in ingredients in and out of the simulation with AI, and you can estimate pretty well whether that's going to be effective or not, or the level of effectiveness it's going to have. Now, in addition to simulation and sort of estimating, you can also take it yourself, and a lot of people have. And from that, you could also periodically maybe do blood tests and, do other sorts of tests that talk about your health in general, and maybe even specific in the heart area. And from those results, you can see the proof, not simulation, but real world. And I know that on your website, certainly, and probably even more people have come to you, but you have testimonies of folks that have talked to you about all the different ailments, and then even some of your employees, as well as, you should talk about how your family is now a part of this business as well, but the benefits up through the family, the employees, and all the folks that have come to you.
Well, Brad, your perspective is great. One of the things the beauty of the 5 years I spent in the direct sales world, and I was at the lead forefront of promoting nitric oxide with like 16 ingredients. That's all we had. And it was working actually quite well. It was the best of the best in that era until about 2013. And then I recommended 2 or 3 things to the company. I was always trying to tell them what to do because I was more interested in the science than the money. Money was necessary, but it wasn't as important to me as the end result. But I firsthand from that experience saw thousands of people all over the world see improved health and blood work was that the foundational part of that is not, well, you're going to feel better, you're going to feel great, and this is going to happen. No, the blood work is the greatest measurement of all. That plus the periodontal, the eye exams, the GFR, which is the kidney flow, the ejection fraction, which is the heart muscle, all of those types of things. I knew what was going to happen because of thousands of people that I'd been interacting with all over the world as I was becoming one of the experts in the field. So when I added additional ingredients, I had a supposition based upon experience that said, this is probably what's going to happen. I went to this same scientist who we had the first discussion over the too many ingredients, and my discussion was the second test that I wanted him to run, which was costing me a couple $100,000. I said, look, I think this is the finest delivery of vitamin D3 in the world. And he goes, oh, that's nonsense. And I said, it may be nonsense, but I've seen too many people, their vitamin D levels have gone up significantly that I think there's something there. And he goes, well, we'll see. Again, 60 days later, he calls me, he goes, you should win the Nobel Prize for this delivery of vitamin D. He said, not only is it the finest bioavailability of vitamin D that's ever been determined, he said it actually because you have proven that you create nitric oxide for over 24 hours at a sustained level that's therapeutic. He says that has signaled the body to release the stored vitamin D in the fat cells. He said, we've never seen that before. He said, so that's why. Well, I didn't even know that the body stored vitamin D in the fat cells. It just made sense to me that I'd seen all these people whose vitamin D levels went from the 30s to the 50s to the 70s, from the 50s to the 80s, all these blood levels, that there was something going on. So I wanted him to test it. Well, he found out through the AI and the 17 million articles at that point, or whatever that he checked it against, that it was actually facilitating the body, doing the let my people go, let the vitamin D go into the bloodstream. So back to the bioavailability, we were not only bringing in vitamin D as an ingredient and getting absorbability, we were getting the triple whammy because the body was releasing its stored inert D into the bloodstream as well, which had a dramatic impact on chronic illness symptoms. And that's why even during the craziness of the last 5 years of the pandemic and the treatments and all the terrible things that went on throughout the world, people who took therapeutic vitamin D, created arginine-based nitric oxide, most of them didn't get sick. And throughout the world, other than in our corrupt system here in America, unfortunately, they were saying, you need arginine, you need vitamin D3. Well, in the United States, we were putting chiropractors in jail for telling people to take zinc, magnesium, and vitamin D and vitamin C. Well, I'm telling you, I was calling everybody I could see. That's where I met Judy Mikovits and I met all of the supposed dirty dozen the people who were the big deceivers. And like 8 out of the 12 went on Cardio Miracle through the pandemic. I actually had famous heart doctors that I can't name or else they'd be, think I was violating his trust, who were buying my product and taking it at the same time maintaining a public stance at their university that they supported the actions of the government. So, the hypocrisy that I saw, Brad, was horrific. And I spent a lot of time and energy trying to help facilitate and fund the people who are trying to help talk common sense to our country and trying to get people to take charge of their own situation by because Cardio Miracle was absolutely filling a need. And our last article that was published, Scientific, said that that Cardio Miracle's ingredients potentially were worth studying as a solution for long-haul COVID and perhaps even other protocol injuries, which we know there's been a boatload of those, a lot of problems. So people who have been suffering, there is hope, because if you increase your vitamin D, you increase your nitric oxide, and you've been suffering from after effects of the last 5 years, you better start taking Cardio Miracle. And if you did something that now you wish you wouldn't have done because it was forced upon you, the greatest antidote for the damage of the spike protein is healing therapeutic nitric oxide and vitamin D3. That's the best antidote. So anyone who's concerned about those things, they may want to take a serious look at our science. They may want to do some blood work, and they may want to give it a try.
Sounds good. Most people have very low vitamin D. They're not getting it in their nutrition. They're not getting enough sunshine. Certainly in the wintertime in certain climates, it's very, very low, dangerously low.
80% are deficient.
Vitamin D levels that are lower than they could be. And it's amazing the contribution in your health that you'll get from that. Now, so it's interesting how the nitric oxide not only opened up the freeway to let in the vitamin D that you were introducing, but it opened up the stored vitamin D that actually allowed that to kind of double down inside the body. Now, let's take a minute and talk about the formulation of the vitamin D that you have in the powder, because that's very specific also.
Well, I didn't know anything about biochemistry. I didn't know anything really about ingredients. I just had to depend on smart people that I would talk to. And initially they said that they thought that the vitamin D that came from lanolin or lamb's wool was calcium was the best. And so because of that, that's what I went with. And then I visited with some people that were in the vegan world. And even though it came from lamb's wool, and it wasn't like you were eating a sheep to have the vitamin D, they recommended the D2, which is from organic mushrooms. And when I used that for one formula that was being used by a major vegan institution, and it didn't move the needle. I mean, it was like 30% of what I was seeing from the others. So I think there was something about the bioavailability of the regular D3 that comes from the source of wool or lanolin in the wool. And it just, maybe it's something about the fact that it maybe has some of the properties of like a little bit of an oil or something that is a little more effective in once it gets into the mitochondria to helping to signal the fat cells. I don't really know the biochemistry. All I know is that the form we use has worked so effectively that sometimes we'll have in one of our blends. For example, we added to our product lion's mane. Well, lion's mane is a mushroom. And it's from that. It's very good for brain health. And we added that a year ago because, I'm interested in preventing my own dementia and Alzheimer's as long as possible. But I think there's obviously wonderful things in mushrooms. But it just ended up that the vitamin D3 coming from the lanolin and the lamb's wool was more effective.
And it's nice on your website as well as on the packaging. You can actually see the list of all the vitamins and minerals and the sources behind most of those. I know you've got B12 in there that's significant also. What's the thinking behind that?
Well, the B12 is really important, and it's important that all of those types of things are methylated, those types of forms, so you get the benefit from it. Because you get a lot of things that interact effectively with delivering the nutrients and anything that supports the heart muscle and then also helps purify the blood and then is delivered effectively is important. One of the things, and sometimes people ask, they say, well, why do you have the proprietary blends? Well, a lot of people do proprietary blends to try to hide stuff. We do it partly because people sometimes get too smart for their own good. And so they see something and they go, oh, well, more of this, 5 grams of this would be better, or 100 milligrams would be better than this or that. And they don't understand that as we've done our analysis, that when you have our 24/7 supported nitric oxide delivery, where most nitric oxides are 1 to 3, 4 hours tops, that you don't need as much of a particular ingredient, that you don't need 100 milligrams or 500 milligrams, that maybe 50 milligrams taken twice a day. Because a lot of the things we have, Brad, we get about a 10x bioavailability. So not only with the liquid being far more effective than capsules. I mean, people say, well, I'm taking these capsules that I got from GNC or from whatever. And I go, well, that's great, but you'd have to take about 400 capsules to equal the bioavailability of a Cardio Miracle drink that has 10 grams. Most capsules have 500 milligrams. So you'd have to take just 22 capsules to get the same amount of actual stuff out of it. So when people often say, well, it's kind of expensive, and I go, compared to what? I said, capsules are $1 each. We're about $1.30, $1.40 on our subscription program for the finest ingredients in the world, and 58 of them instead of 2 or 3 in a capsule. I said, what are you thinking? So people sometimes get in their own way. And like you said, the most valuable thing is your own blood work. Your most valuable thing is going to the gym and seeing how your stamina holds up. I don't know if you've noticed, you and your wife, since you started going to the nearby gym, but if you were to strap on the VO2 max situation, you'll see after taking Cardio Miracle, you're getting 15 to 20% more oxygen. It just dilates those microcapillaries in the lungs, and people get better delivery. The other thing is, most people who are really in tune with their workouts in their body, they recover in about half the time. So they can work out harder, longer, and recover faster. So it enables great performance for people in sports, swimming, biking, hiking, altitude change, jet lag, travel, all of those types of things are benefited, because one of the secrets is that most people don't know is that it dilates the artery, it increases the oxygen to blood flow, but it also strengthens the lymphatic contraction. So when the lymphatic contraction is strengthened, that means great stuff coming in, garbage getting out, and more efficiently. And when that happens, then obviously the body is less toxic.
Amazing. More efficient on the way in, more efficient on the way out. So you're getting more nutrient help, and you're cleaning out the garbage more significantly as well. So that's a double whammy there. Now, I know a lot of people have come to you, and you may not even have realized you were going to help them in the ways you have. What are some anecdotal information about folks that have come and said, well, now my this is better and my that is better? What are the stories you're hearing?
If you had about a month, I could probably tell you all of them. I have heard so many stories, and my wife, Janet, who I always tell people, well, you can always trust Janet. She's an angel. She's the sweetest to come. Brad, I have seen so many miracles in people's lives. And a miracle is really something that we just don't understand, but that often is based upon science or reality. So that's why we think Cardio Miracle's an adequate name for us, because we see things that we don't even understand are happening, but the fact is they're scientifically based. So think about how extensive the capillary network is in your body. It's everywhere. It's, hundreds of thousands of miles of capillaries. Well, every capillary has a lining called an endothelial cell. The endothelial cells line all of the capillaries, all the lymph vessels, all of the organs of the body. Nitric oxide is created in the capillaries. It flashes along the capillary wall. It's the body's greatest natural anti-inflammatory. Reduces inflammation. So, capillaries in the eyes, macular degeneration, wet, dry, capillaries either atrophying or drying up or exploding because they're weakened and the blood flow. So you have wet and dry macular degeneration. if you have healthy capillaries in the eyes from nitric oxide and vitamin D, what's going to happen? You're not going to have the same kind of problems that you would have in the eyes. In the mouth, what happens? What does the hygienist tell you? Oh, you're not flossing enough. Why? Your pocket depths are getting deeper and deeper. Why are they getting deeper and deeper? Because essentially you now have clogged capillaries, atherosclerosis in the gums. So if you increase the oxygen flow, increase the health of the gums, you're going to have less periodontal problems. They've now finally, I used to go to dental conventions 10 years ago and tell people they needed to take Cardio Miracle to help prevent their dental problems. And they looked at me, they thought I was crazy. And they said, well, it helps heart and heart has nothing to do with it. Well, now the dentist finally, here, it's been 17 years of me trying to tell people some of these things that happen. And now the dentists are saying, oh, periodontal disease is now tied to dementia. Periodontal disease is now tied to heart disease. Why? Because there's capillaries there, doctor. Dentist, there's capillaries. And if the capillaries aren't healthy, everything goes bad. So the mouth is one of the biggest sources of problems up above and problems down below in inflammation. So I've seen calcium scores in the heart. I've seen kidneys that were on the verge of dialysis, seen the GFR, which is essentially the blood pressure flow of the kidneys. I've seen that people go from worrying about when they were going to start getting dialysis to not ever having to worry about that again. I've seen people with neuropathy so bad they could barely walk, all of a sudden finding that they get relief that they never counted on. I see people having shoulder surgery that they're supposedly going to take forever to recover in half the time. I've seen knee replacement, recover in half the time. I've seen diabetic ulcers, that are out there that never heal up, all of a sudden healing up. I see wounds. I see women delivering babies with giant placentas because of blood flow, blood flow. And I'm not a doctor and I'm not recommending. I'm just telling you, I've seen a lot of stuff and it's all been good. I've never seen one major problem other than a few people say, my stomach gets a little bloated or that maybe it's this. Well, guess why? If you've got an inflamed stomach full of capillaries or an inflamed colon or intestines that are raw because you've been eating and drinking and worrying and everything else for a long time and have ulcers, yeah, you're going to have a little bit of an adjustment when all of a sudden the healing comes in. The old saying, no pain, no gain. And sometimes things in homeopathy, things get worse before they get better. So we occasionally see that. But most of the time, Brad, most of the people, and the fact that we've spent hundreds of hours flavoring very nasty tasting ingredients. If somebody wants to have some fun, just open up an arginine capsule of arginine and put it on your tongue. It tastes like roadkill. Same thing with grapeseed extract. Same thing with lion's mane. And same thing with, you name it. Black pepper extract. Does that sound fun? No. So I'm just telling you that it's been really amazing. And yet with Cardio Miracle, other than a big wad of protein in it, you can mix it with any fruit. You can make any kind of a fruit or vegetable smoothie with Cardio Miracle. You can put in on a keto diet, you can put in heavy cream or half and half if you want. You mix it with sparkling water. You can mix it with, I had a guy once tell me that he used to take it with a shot of whiskey. And I said, well, you're probably not going to get us better. Your blood pressure won't improve if you keep doing that. But the bottom line is it's very versatile. You can take it with as much water or as little as you want. And you can essentially put in apple cider vinegar if it's too sweet for you. That's occasionally we get the companies go, well, I wish it wasn't so sweet. And I go, hey, if you had any idea how bad these ingredients taste by themselves, you would understand what we're trying to do. And we have the finest organic monk fruit, the finest organic stevia, organic flavors wherever we possibly can. Occasionally, we've had to use a natural flavor, but everything we do is food, quality, organic, plant, food grade, if at all humanly possible.
Well, I noticed the sweetness in there, and thanks for explaining why you have the sweetness to make up for all the bitterness, I imagine. And I do probably the same as you. I've got it in kind of a 12-ounce little glass here, and I'm okay with that. I just throw it down because I think as every drink I take, how good it's for me. With my wife, I put it in more of her 32-ounce container tumbler thing,
perfect.
And it dilutes it down so it's not as sweet. Each drink is, less sweet. I think she prefers it that way. That's good. Now, I got one question on sort of the maybe like all the benefits you talked about. Can a person who is on blood thinners also take this? Is that a no-no or is that okay?
It's one that needs supervision. And the only reason is you have K1 and you have K2. And primarily ours is K2. There is a little K1 in the Nutrifusion blend because of all the vegetables that are there. So the purpose for most people, so I would say this, if you've been recommended a blood thinner, first of all, do your own research. Research what's in blood thinners. Research and extensively question whoever's advising you to take one. Because if they're taking, I'll give you an example. I had a time a few years, 10 years ago, 12 years ago, my mother was 90. And her doctor, because of something, all of a sudden, because I couldn't keep track of her all the time. She was very busy. I was busy. And came back and she called me. She says, my doctor's recommending that I take a blood thinner. And I go, okay, why? He said, as a preventative. I said, a preventative of what? And he said, well, he said she might have a stroke. I said, okay, and you might get run over by a car too. So that means you should never go outside again? I said, everyone might have a stroke. I said, what are the odds? What percentage? And she, 5%. I said, well, you can either deal with the 5% odds that you might have a stroke or the 100% odds that every time you hit your arm, you're going to have a contusion or you're going to have a bruise, or if you cut yourself, you're going to bleed like crazy, or you're going to all of a sudden get bloody noses, or your mouth is going to be bleeding, and you can be in pain all the time. I'd take my chances on not taking the blood thinner if it were me. But this is the problem, Brad, of our medical situation. It's almost like, but if a person said, hey, we just took your blood work, your cholesterol is 500, not 200, 500. And your LDL is, 300. And it looks like you're 75% blocked in the Widowmaker. Then maybe you take a blood thinner until you can work your way through some other therapies to change your circumstance. But but they give it to them before surgery, they give it to them after. I mean, it's ridiculous, but the side effects are horrific of a blood thinner. So what Cardio Miracle does is actually makes your blood like the old oil, synthetic oil, Slick 50. It makes it like that it's slippery. So the reality is nitric oxide is clearing up the inflammation in the artery. The artery, when it's inflamed, is sticky. Nitric oxide makes it smooth. So it's like the difference between going on a gravel road or going on a freshly paved freeway or a cement freeway. Would you rather have your blood flowing through a cement road or a dirt or gravel road? There's a big difference. So it's all up to everyone individually, but I can tell you for myself, there's no way I would ever take a blood thinner. I just wouldn't. But Cardio Miracle is scientifically validated that it oxygenates, and with the nitric oxide study that said we're safely delivering it 24 to 36 hours, you don't have to worry about sticky arteries anymore. That's why you don't have to worry about cholesterol anymore unless it's at some outrageous number, because there's nothing to stick to it. It makes it like Teflon instead of like Velcro. So you want your arteries and those capillaries to be like Teflon, that just flows the blood smoothly through. And then with the special gate that opens up to take the bioavailability of the nutrients, then you do want to have a sticky road that's full of potholes that the plaque is being formed to help heal those potholes. Crazy metaphor, but the reality is sticky arteries are the enemy, and thick blood is the enemy, not necessarily that people need to take blood thinners or statin drugs.
Right. Well, and so a lot of people have been taking that for a lot of years. And so I think it's important for those folks to understand, if they have been, that they might not mix Cardio Miracle with it. It's interesting, if you're approaching a world where they think you might need to, you might take Cardio Miracle for a while and check your blood results, periodically, and find you don't need it at all. But that's up between you and your doctor.
Exactly.
And again, your doctor or your doctors will have their opinion, and then always bring it back to yourself.
It's your body. Everyone makes a big deal of choice and body. Why not your own choice for your own medical treatment? Because, Brad, it's now determined, with all the things that have happened in the last 5 years, third leading cause of death, going into a hospital or medical errors.
And they're even trying to clean all that up, because nowadays, if you go in, you'll see there's kind of robots, delivering formulas, and then QR, barcode scanning on everything so that they don't make mistakes. But it's very complicated, and people are coming and going all the time. And it's really almost impossible to execute 100% accuracy all the time. So they don't. And there are issues. So you got to remember, you're number one. Always ask the questions like you did, John, for sure. Now, let me ask you this. When you're taking the Cardio Miracle, I know there's mention of don't take it with caffeine or don't take it with protein. Let's talk about when to take it with this or without that. Okay. Let's talk about that.
Great. Thank you. The reason caffeine actually downregulates your nitric oxide. It actually suppresses it in a certain way. But caffeine isn't all bad. It's just that too much caffeine actually is somewhat inflammatory, and it also downregulates your nitric oxide. Protein is essentially like the I-5 for you Californians, that from 3 o'clock to 7 o'clock is pretty crowded. So if you want your nitric oxide to function properly, it's best not to clog the freeway, so to speak. And protein is made of amino acids. And so when you're creating nitric oxide, those are from amino acids. And you don't want to crowd the freeway, so to speak, of having too many amino acids at the same time going down the freeway. So we just recommend that you take your Cardio Miracle first thing, best on an empty stomach, but not the end of the world if you don't. But if you take it if a person needs a little something in their stomach to fill, maybe they get the bloating, or maybe they feel the turmeric's too strong, or the beets or whatever, then with a piece of toast, a carbohydrate, or fruit. Fruit is great. Fruit with Cardio Miracle is wonderful. Mixing it with fresh orange juice is a treat. Mixing it in a fruit smoothie is fantastic. Works great. But save the protein for about 30 minutes later, because once the Cardio Miracle gets in your system, it does its job. Then go ahead and take all the protein you want. No big deal. If you take the protein first, then give yourself 45 minutes to an hour so that when the Cardio Miracle comes in, the freeway's not as crowded, so make sure that it gets its chance to do it. And then if you want to drink your coffee, that's great. You're best to take Cardio Miracle first, then enjoy your coffee, 20, 30 minutes later, or whatever your caffeine is. One of the things that's exciting is some of the people that you met at the event told me that they've, in the last 2 weeks, have already given up their addiction to Diet Coke, Coke Zero, Mountain Dew, all the caffeine, the energy drinks, the Monsters, the 5-hour energies, those are horrific. And the reality is Cardio Miracle will give you all of the oxygen, all the blood flow. It doesn't give you the same major spike, but there's no crash. And so one of the great things about Cardio Miracle replacing many people's caffeine habits, including coffee. I'm not personally a coffee or tea drinker, but, I know people enjoy drinking their coffee and they enjoy certain brands and things like that. So drink it for the brand, not for the stimulation, and then make Cardio Miracle your go-to for the energy, the awareness. We hear people all the time feel like their brain fog goes away once they're on Cardio Miracle, that they're more alert, they're shocked. In fact, one of the great tests, Brad, often for people is they'll be on Cardio Miracle for a few months and they go, man, I feel great, blah, blah. So they'll go off it. And about 4 days later, they go, I forgot how bad I used to feel. Because we take it for granted when we feel good. Somebody like yourself who's very fit, it appears, and lives a healthy lifestyle, you will probably just, well, yeah, I think I'm feeling pretty good, and I'm going to the gym, and you'll just see some incremental things. But if you're really pushing yourself, and when you start looking back, and if you're keeping track of certain things, I have people all the time say, I used to do 15 minutes on this machine, now I'm doing 20. What's that all about? Or I used to do this and I would be exhausted, now I'm doing this and I can do it longer. And they forget that when you're oxygenating and you're delivering therapeutic nitric oxide, you're getting about 20% more oxygen. And if your mitochondria, which is one of our studies, talks about, and this is why Cardio Miracle works really well with intermittent fasting, is that the Cardio Miracle nitric oxide blend essentially facilitates autophagy. Autophagy is the burning of waste products in the cell to create glucose or energy. So there's actually a statement in one of our studies that says Cardio Miracle's ingredients facilitate autophagy, which is a remarkable discovery that you can literally burn the trash in your cell, turn it into energy, and discard the rest fast, quickly, and efficiently through your lymphatic system, which now is getting a stronger contraction than it was getting before.
Oh, I feel it already. Like I told you, there's a Gold's Gym that just opened across the street a couple of weeks ago. So we joined that, and I've been doing this at about the same time, and I feel the effects. And like you said, the 10 or 15 or even 20% more on the different machines or the workouts or the cardio and so forth. It's interesting also, I'm in California. We have a big, huge orange tree in the backyard, and oftentimes we pluck those in the morning and we just squeeze the orange and drink the orange juice.
Heaven.
We can combine it with the Cardio Miracle.
Heavenly. Truly, my favorite drink on earth is fresh blood orange juice with Cardio Miracle. But fresh orange juice every day with Cardio Miracle, a little bit of lemon, maybe some grapefruit from time to time for those who are fortunate to live in a place that grows that. Fresh orange juice with Cardio Miracle with ice in the morning to start your day. Doesn't get any better than that.
Beautiful. Yeah, it's been hot lately, so I think the addition of the ice would be quite good.
Yeah.
Hey, John, now I got this next section that is called Heart's First Whisper. So I've got some questions that I put together. Now, we're going back a ways more to the spiritual event that you had earlier on with some of these questions. So If you're ready for that.
All right, ready.
First question is, what's the one truth your spiritual experience etched into your daily life?
An appreciation for all the people I love the most.
Beautiful. So the notion of love, gratitude, appreciation, not taking anything for granted, that really kind of woke that up in you.
It really accentuated. I had lost a brother when I was 11 to a drunk driver car accident. So I had always had a very keen awareness and gratitude for life. But when I went through that ambulance ride and all of those spiritual transformative events, I think it just gave me that things that were more important in life, as opposed to things like, recreation and things that I had perhaps done quite a bit of. I didn't have the same amount of interest in. I still love sports. I still love news. I still like travel. But I just feel a sense of purpose and focus on the mission of blessing humanity that has taken over more of my time than things that I used to do just for myself.
Well, that's amazing. And that goes right into question 2 here, which is, where did love show up most unexpectedly in your recovery and reinvention?
Well, interesting enough, some people go in life and one of the difficult things, I was in my 20s when my parents got divorced. And unfortunately, I was in a less than satisfactory situation for 31 years. And so when you go through a divorce, it has an impact on children. I have 5 great children. And it had a real impact on them because they kind of hoped that I wouldn't give up on things. But I was literally at a point where I thought that I wasn't going to live, and that in order for me to be there and someday, but it really does take time for the healing sometimes with children. And so that spiritually transformative event where I almost died several times, that actually cemented and brought back those relationships. And then, last year on my birthday, I felt like I was at my own funeral because I had all 5 of my children totally appreciative and grateful that their dad was still alive.
Amazing. And now, how many years is it with Janet?
Janet and I have been 12 fantastic years coming up on Halloween.
And I think Cardio Miracle was formed about 14 years ago, right?
I was doing things with it about 13 years ago, but Janet has been here 95% of the way and has witnessed it and has been an unbelievable support. She's been the love of my life. She's been the inspiration, and she's actually was my most significant cardio miracle because I didn't realize when we met, she was so darn cute that I didn't realize that she had serious issues with depression, fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue. She had a lot of health problems and actually had been overprescribed some prescriptions for 20 years. And she was been able to turn all that back. Her family, every time she sees her family, every time she's around her kids, they all go, "We are so thrilled to have our mom back," because they didn't, most of her adult life, she was not well physically, always has been darling and adorable, but she just wasn't physically well. And her vitamin D, Brad, went from low 30s to 80 on Cardio Miracle, which is unbelievable. And she had been supplementing for years and having very little success. So that's been really wonderful to share that journey with her and have her health be so responsive. She sometimes takes 6 servings a day to try to keep up with my energy and schedule. But I'll see her all the time. I never can go anywhere and not say, "Jan, do you have some Cardio Miracle?" Because she's always got her own secret stash. She takes it everywhere. She's very selfish with it sometimes and says, "I need it." So, make sure we have at least 6 months supply at our different houses and places that we go.
Well, I had the pleasure of meeting her at the event, and we talked a lot about what you just had shared. And so I could tell as she was standing there with her Cardio Miracle in her glass that was all mixed together and drinking it. And so, yes, and from that, I can see you're one of the most luckiest guys in the world.
I am.
And yeah, and so congratulations to that. Oh, and also it's a family business. Your daughter was there, and then your granddaughter, Elle, was there also working that booth.
Yeah, that's my bonus daughter, my daughter-in-law. My son, her husband, is a National Speakers Hall of Fame member. He's a world-class entertainer, jasonhewlett.com. Phenomenal entertainer. He's now functioning as president of the company while I try to put together the next alliterations. We are going to come out with a workout product, an electrolyte that's going to be a companion product, a children's Cardio Miracle, because our people are clamoring and would like to have something that they could substitute for their kids' drinks. And it's safe for them to take the way it is, but we're going to we're making a formula that might be really fun for kids. And then we have a couple of other things. We're not going to have a huge line of things, just things that interact. But then I have my 2 of my sons work in the business. My 3rd son helps run our ranch and helps with some of the warehousing stuff. And then both my daughters are big advocates, but don't work for us. And then my cute little granddaughter, who's just unbelievable. She's becoming our best marketing person at conventions. Everyone loves her. In fact, she spotted you and she said, "There's Brad Peterson." And so she says, "You need to meet him, Grandpa." so it was exciting to have her there. And she's worked. So it's a family legacy business that basically is based upon blessing humanity. Obviously, it's been successful. It's going to be even more successful as the word continues to spread. We're going to be featured on a Maha film by the end of the year as one of the answers to the problems of the last 5-6 years. So we've got a lot of exciting days ahead, and we're very excited to have your followers and and listeners to be able to benefit, and totally on our risk, 100% money back guarantee. Try Cardio Miracle for themselves. Do the blood work, do the exercise, see how you feel, see what other people say about how you do. And I think you'll be seeing wonderful, wonderful results from the people. And we're even HSA and FSA approved, which I sometimes forget. And we're also BSCG approved, which is Banned Substance Control Group, which is at the highest levels of purity and manufacturing quality for even all professional sports, including the Olympics. Cardio Miracle is certified to be eligible to be taken by athletes even at that level.
And so when you said FSA approved, you're talking about medical flexible spending accounts?
Yep. And HSA, so people not only can get it on subscription from us at a very nice discount through a link on your account, on your website, but they can also pay for it with their FSA or HSA money, getting them another nice discount, which our California friends need that, as well as our Canadian friends that have, lower, the dollar exchange is low, and there's obviously more taxes in California and some other states. So the HSA, if you have one, that makes Cardio Miracle even most people a third less money than it would be otherwise.
Well, thanks to you guys, you created a special page for me, which is cardiomiracle.com/Brad. And when people go there, they're going to see all the discounts and the savings they get. I didn't know they could also use FSA money on top of it to get that extra sort of pre-tax benefit also. So that's huge. And by the way, just so folks know, I'm going to tell you about at the end of the podcast how to enter to win. I'm going to start just giving away packets each week. Just you guys submit your names in. I'll do a random drawing and I'll give away packets to folks. That'll be shipped to you directly from Cardio Miracle. I just feel like it's wonderful. I want to give away some free stuff. Plus, if you go to that page, you'll get discounted things as well. It's all a miracle. What a perfect name there, John. Hey, let's go to number 3 question here, which is, what fear do you no longer serve and what replaced it?
I've always been financially successful, but when you start over, walk away from 2 multi-million-dollar careers in your 60s, people think you're kind of crazy. And I just met Janet. I wanted to show her the world. I wanted her to have, the same benefits that I'd provided for previous people in my life. And, I wanted her to have a beautiful home. She had never traveled the world. And so we've been traveling the world as we're doing the cardio. I work, it's a mission. So it's not a job. I work around the clock, essentially, but at the same time, we enjoy life, and we've had an amazing. So I think the fact that I never really feared, I never was concerned about being afraid that I couldn't make a living. But, when you start over from zero at 62, walking away from a guaranteed 7-figure residual for the rest of your life, there's a certain amount of angst, especially when it's a complex business like this has been. I had never manufactured my own product. I had never been in this business. I have 50 ingredients plus. I'm dealing with suppliers from all over the world. I have multiple people working for me and depending on me. I'm dealing with regulators and entities in our government that are, bought and paid for by adverse circumstances. There's a lot of moving parts on this enterprise. And so I think it was just wanting to make sure that we could get the science to validate so that we would be above any scrutiny. The other thing is we're actually part of an action that's been filed with the regulators in the country. We were asked by a major international group to be included with a couple of the major, far bigger manufacturers, because they said Cardio Miracle had the most compelling science of any supplement they had ever seen. So we're actually in front of committees and the regulators that I'm going to be able to talk even more freely about the medical benefits once we get some legislation passed that will benefit. Brad, when's the last time you heard of somebody dying from a vitamin D overdose?
Yeah, it's just the opposite. Everyone's super low on that. I remember earlier what you said, though, if you focus on the value the business, the finances, the growth will come. And it's certainly that's what you've done. Not only the value of the product, but the intention of the product to deliver it to people for their health benefit in ways people haven't achieved this before. So the value is clear. This brings us into number 4. What's a tiny daily act that keeps you aligned with your mission?
I became a major fan of journaling the last 20 years, and it's been very revealing. And whenever I'm down or whenever I feel like I'm overwhelmed, I'll go back and read about where I was 14 years ago today or 12 years ago today. And it's remarkable. I think one of the important things and that's why scripture is important. That's why meditating is important. But journaling to me is very cathartic, and it's very important because not only is it your daily history or your life's history, but it helps you remember. And I'm very candid in my journal, much to the chagrin of spouses or whatever that at times may say, "Why would you write that?" I said, "Because that's how I felt." I'm a firm believer. I want posterity to know how I felt, and not necessarily just writing something as some sort of a tribute to myself or whatever. So I talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly in my journaling, and I journal almost every day, and I write down a lot of things about the business, about my life, about Janet, about my children, about, my miracles that happened to me and the customers that I talk to. It's been a marvelous, marvelous part of my life.
Sounds like it might be a memoir one day.
I have about 4 of them that I need to finish in the next couple months. And so I'm getting a little help on doing that. But I've got two and a half books that are almost finished. And that's a high priority by year end.
That's great. And I love the fact you can go back to it and you can get the perspective on where you were there, where you are now. Even if you might feel down, you can go look back and you go, oh my God, that what I've done and accomplished along with myself and the love for family and so forth, that's great. And that brings us to number 5 is when have you felt most guided when building Cardio Miracle?
A lot of people meditate, study scripture and pray. I do those things, but not as focused. My thing basically is I try to be in a place that I follow my gut feeling or intuitive or my spiritual side, and I just do stuff. I just do it. So one of my prophetic guides through the years, their motto is just do it, like Nike or make it happen. I feel like when I decided to leave the guaranteed income and go into the nutritional business, I had a very significant 7-figure income in the financial world. And when I decided to leave that, I felt really guided to do that. And then when I felt to leave again the nutritional company to start Cardio Miracle, I felt guided again. And then I've had to change manufacturers like 5 times. And every time I felt like I was being guided by my grandfather was actually a very, very successful manufacturer of food products. He was back in the day, pickles, punch, jams, jellies, various ice cream toppings. He was one of the top in the Intermountain West. And I've often felt like he was kind of one of my spiritual guides, because there's been times where I thought, man, I've got to find a better manufacturer. And then bingo, out of left field, somebody will come up and say, hey, if you need a manufacturer, and then I go meet with them and I end up finding great people. So I've had just a lot of times, but often it's been, and for most things, I think you're guided the most when you're humble and when you're looking for answers, and when you even cry out to the heavens for answers, I think they will come.
I like that humble part for sure, because for you at this point, it's being of service to others. It seems to be a big focus. Your guiding seems to be coming from your intuition. Maybe a lot of people might have some intuition they can connect with, but they may not have that other part that you have, which is action. That intuition has to be followed by action to go off and do things. you are of service to others, and you're fearless in many ways when you're doing this, which is allowing you to actually be as successful and creating products that are as effective and helpful to others as possible. That's beautiful. Now that brings us into 6, which is what's a relationship that healed because of this path, and how?
My 2 children that I was estranged from 20 some odd years ago. It's been wonderful. And that has been very, very, very helpful. The other thing is I like to view myself as forgiving. I really believe in people. And probably the most disappointing part of my world is when I pay people, I believe in them, and then they don't really perform at the level of what they said they would do, or don't perform. And then they end up resenting me. I really struggle with that. It's hard to pay people to resent you. That's always been an issue in my life. But at the same time, I have other miracles with other people who are grateful that I helped give them an opportunity. And so that helps make up for it. But it's really hard on a guy like me who thinks everybody, one of my things that my former spouse said to me, she said, that kind of cut to the quick, is she says, John, your problem is you really think everyone likes you. I never forgot that. And that was a pretty deep, but then with Janet, she goes, John, everyone does like you. In fact, they love you. So it's a little bit different sometimes of what we go through in life at different phases. But and no offense to my first spouse, she meant well. We were just in different, not in different pages. We were in different libraries on certain things. But we had 5 great kids. She's been a wonderful mother and grandmother. She's a good person. We just wasn't the right fit. And thank you for God sending me Janet for this part of the mission, because I really could not have accomplished it without her love and support. It's been immeasurably. But relationships with my children being healed through this journey has been great.
And when you think back through your entire life, everything that happened for a reason. You were with that wife for a reason, had those children for a reason, to then find different paths for a reason,
Exactly.
And then to find Janet, and so on, and so on, and so on. And that is what made you who you are today. And I would imagine, like me, I wouldn't have changed a thing. That is the course that built the wisdom that you have, that you're sharing with folks. So that's a beautiful thing. And that takes us to 7, which is, if you could whisper one sentence to your pre-2007 self, what would it be?
Don't invest your life and career into something that somebody else has control over. I got involved with the golf business in 1998, put everything on the line, took it to 100 million, went back to 0 because the people I was the franchise of could determine what I could do. So that's when I lost everything in 2003 after having made 30-40 million dollars in my other career. So I think that if you're like me, which is, I'm kind of unusual, obviously, but if you're like me, you really would just as soon have all the responsibility fall on your success or failure on you, not on somebody who can pull the rug out from under you or change your world or whatever. In fact, the only thing that concerns me at times, and that's why I'm now looking at international manufacturing and other things and backups, is you just never can know when something screwy can come into your life that you weren't planning on, and somebody in our society can actually, we've seen enough crazy things in our government that you never know when all of a sudden they're going to say, well, we've decided that arginine is illegal or going to be banned or whatever. So my purpose at this point is to make sure I have all the safety valves in place worldwide in order to be able to continue the mission of helping the hearts of mankind, regardless of whether different governments in different countries go rogue or no longer, or shanghaied from the benefits of their citizens. So that's probably one of the things I spend time on now, is figuring out how to back up manufacturing, back up all of our systems so that our customers will never be without this very, very life-altering supplement that they've grown to depend on and trust so much.
Well, customers are used to kind of immediate feedback. I buy something, it shows up pretty quick, and that it's always there and available. That's just the world we've grown into. Now that means there's extra work for you to make sure you build an uninterruptible service and solution here. And it sounds like you finally got yourself into the driver's seat where you can make the decisions. And yet you're building a beautiful team of really smart people so you can hand those folks things to do. And they do it with you because it's a family, even those that aren't even related to you.
They're like family. We love them. Yeah, they're great.
Exactly. Well, hey, number 8 is what song, prayer, or practice steadies your heart when doubt visits?
God Bless the USA. One of my favorite songs. I'm a singer. My son's a singer. My family's a singer. Whenever I get discouraged, primarily with, our government, with the corruption there, but that's a really important part of my patriotism and my gratitude for living in a great country like this. I love lots of songs. I used to listen every morning. I used to play for my kids the songs from Les Mis, and so two of them in that would be good would be God on High, Hear My Prayer. And the other one was Empty Chairs and Empty Tables, which was lamenting the loss of loved ones. I actually like funerals because I love hearing the stories of people's lives. And so I find that that actually gives me fuel for living by reflecting on those who I love that have passed on.
Ah, yes. And when you're at a funeral, you get that birth date and then the day they passed. And in between those is the dash.
Yeah.
And the dash is the life that we live. And we want our dash to be as long and illustrious as possible. So that's a good reminder of that. Well, that brings us to number 9, our final question, which is, what legacy do you hope your work leaves on someone who will never meet you?
That we were successful in bridging nutrition, medicine, and science to heal the hearts of mankind, and that people would say, John Hewlett left a legacy of healing millions of lives and making their lives better for them, their loved ones, and their communities by his tireless, fanatical devotion to fulfill the mission of Cardio Miracle that started in 2013.
Beautiful. Hey, I'll drink to that. Cheers. Well, I got to tell you, what a great podcast this has been, John. Thank you for sharing both your spiritual turning point and the journey behind Cardio Miracle. For listeners curious about nitric oxide and John's story, I'll have all the links, down in the description below, the links to Cardio Miracle's website, certainly the links that I have that you'll be able to follow for even the just discounts that you'll see. All right, so that's all good. And just remember, as we talked about all this, it isn't medical advice. See your doctor. It's tons of information about what the health value is here, but talk to your doctor for sure. And then, of course, always the way I do it is I always treat myself as the doctor, getting consultative information and making decisions for myself. Now, one thing I talked about earlier was I did want to run a promotion. So if you go to bradpeterson.com, you're going to see on that website a form that you can fill out. And when you do, you're going to send it in every single week. Whoever goes in there, I'm going to do random drawings, and I am going to send a 6-pack of the Cardio Miracles off to you guys for free. That's just the deal. I worked it out with Cardio Miracle. Thank you, John. And I essentially just do this drawing, grab some names, send them over to Cardio Miracle, and they're going to send you the 6-pack. And then if you like it, you go back to cardiomiracle.com/Brad, and you'll see all the discounts there. If you scroll down that page, you'll see if you buy 1 or 2 or 3, you buy 3 for the price of 4, you get 4 for the price of 3. That would be a better deal. And you're going to see all sorts of benefits there based on the full discussion that we had today. So John, amazing. Thank you for all your time. I think this is going to go far and wide and help a lot of folks.
And that's why we felt, it was a miracle that we came to Chicago to meet you. And the fact that we met you essentially the last day and interacted with you, and that I was around and available to come and for us to be able to visit as extensive. I mean, you took a lot of time. We were had a lot of demands, and it was meant to be. And I really admire the spirit, the intellect. Obviously, you're a technology whiz, which is always admired by me. But you really have such a wonderful connection. I remember my granddaughter glowingly saying, "Oh, I love Brad Peterson's podcast." And I thought, wow, if you can keep the attention of a 20-year-old who wants to travel the world and do all the things she's doing, that was impressive. But very, very delighted to have you joining the Cardio Miracle advocacy and our efforts to try to make the world a better place, Brad.
And now we have the treat of actually meeting the woman behind the man, which is Janet. Janet, tell us about this experience with this crazy guy, John, and Cardio Miracle.
Well, I'll start by saying that when we were first engaged, I met his best friend who said, "You better buckle up because you're in for the ride of your life." That's been the case. It's been amazing because we've seen so many people get their health back, me included. I was the first with John that had so many things that I suffered from with autoimmune disease, with chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, rheumatoid arthritis, depression. And to have that subside after 40-some years is really pretty amazing. But we see this all the time. My mother with neuropathy, when she was 83, within 3 months, she was walking around where she'd been in a wheelchair when we had to go out. She could walk, around the home, but going out in the public, she'd be in a wheelchair.
And actually a brother-in-law that had a couple of stents and heart attacks.
Yeah.
That is actually our dear employee's mother and her stepfather feeling like their life's been extended. And I would encourage your listeners that as they have their cardio miracles, share them in the comments, because a lot of people need to hear multiple times why things can be helpful to them. And that would be the best way to, but if you are a caregiver, if you're concerned about your parents, if you're concerned about preventing your own health demise, or if you have somebody who's in desperate need of, you can go online, you can go in AI, put any condition, and then put in nitric oxide deficiency or relationship, or vitamin D relationship to any disease. You'll find, without exception, that all chronic illnesses benefit from sustained bioavailable nitric oxide that eliminates what they call endothelial dysfunction, and virtually all benefit from therapeutic vitamin D3. So there really isn't anything out there that can't benefit from this formulation and the science that we've accomplished over the last 12 years.
And I know a lot of people like to do that research. So that's actually really good advice. Get out there and search for that combination, and you'll find those reports. And then come back to Cardio Miracle and see the ingredients that they put in. It's nice to also know you guys have updated and improved that 8 times, and you continue to do that as you learn more and more. So that's wonderful. It feels like it's really closed loop feedback between you, your customers, the scientists, those that do the evaluation, your suppliers, the manufacturing. It's really an interesting process. And I just feel that from you too, that your service to others, your intensity and your energy is to just make life better. It isn't just for yourself. Your life is great, in many ways. It's just for as many people as you can reach out to. I love it. So I want to say thank you to you, and also to Janet. Lovely to meet her. To hear about Jason, I haven't talked to him yet, and his wife,
Tammy.
Exactly. And then Ella, the pride of your eye right now, your granddaughter who is beyond her years in spirituality and so many other dimensions. Good for you, Ella. And so thank you for sharing your message and your light with us today.
Thank you. It's been an honor, Brad. Thanks so much.
Hey, and to our listeners, if John's story moved you, be sure to like, subscribe, and share. And let us know in the comments, okay? And I always get in those comments. I love them. I'll get right back to you. And if this episode spoke to your heart, share it with someone who might need a little light today. And until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and go beyond the illusion to discover your true self. Take care, everyone, and bye for now.